My dad's fiancée, my new stepmom. She wants me to go up on their wedding day and say a speech in front of everyone about how great she is, and she wants me to put down my mom and let everybody know how terrible she is. So you know what I decide to do instead? I decide to get a bit of revenge for my mom and make my own speech. Although I do believe that there are nice and kind-hearted stepmoms in the world, I'm still someone who'd prefer to not have my mom be around me all the time, than be with my stepmom/dad's fiancé who pretended to love me. She did a great job trying to pretend to love me in the beginning, until I realized she was nothing but a snake. Right from when I was a child, I knew my parents would not last together. I know it's quite odd for a child to know this, but in my situation, it was pretty obvious. It even got to a point where they were always fighting, arguing, and yelling at each other and could not even stand each other's sight. I have even forgotten the number of times my grandparents had to take me until my parents settled whatever issue was going on with them. This continued for almost 4 years until my mom said she couldn't continue anymore and they divorced. As young as I was, I believed that the reason for my parents' nonstop fight was because my mom was so annoying and would not keep her mouth shut, as my father always claimed. But when I grew older, I realized that my father was the problem. The typical rich, spoiled kid who believed he could have any woman he wanted because of his money and influence. So barely a couple months into his relationship with Mom, he began to cheat on her. According to Mom, she knew that my dad was seeing someone else, even when they were dating. But because she loved him, she believed that she could win his heart completely. And with time, he would not look at other women, but she was wrong. My dad was a terrible cheat and a liar. The first time my mom caught him red-handed cuddling his affair partner in a fancy restaurant. My dad swore that Mom was mistaken. Later on, he admitted that he was cheating on my mom, and he swore to her that he would change, and she fell for it. Not knowing that she was setting herself up. Instead of leaving him as she should have, she stayed, fell for his lies, and continued to love him. And eventually they went ahead to get married. A year after my parents tied the knot, my mom said that his infidelity became worse, and he would even go as far as bringing some of his affair partners home, claiming that they were his business partners or distant cousins, and, well, he just kept giving her different excuses all the time, even though it was very evident that he was straight up lying to her. When I asked my mom why she didn't leave their marriage, when it wasn't too late for her to leave, she told me that she found out that she was pregnant with me and did not want to be a single mom. To her, being pregnant with me was a second chance for marriage because she believed having a child would just straight up change my dad. But she was mistaken again. In fact, her pregnancy year was her most lonely and depressing year, to the point that she even had to move in with her parents so they could just look after her. After I was born, she moved back in with my dad, and I grew up to see him and my mom have a terrible relationship. I remember this very particular crazy argument very vividly. That night, my father returned home very late and was in my room pretending to sleep after waiting for him. Immediately, his car pulled over and he walked into the house, and my mom just started screaming at him. She had enough of his attitude and she could not keep quiet anymore. Already, my dad did not have any excuse for coming home that late, and it wasn't the first or the second time. Earlier that evening, my mom called his office, and we were told that he left the office at 5 p.m. sharp, only to return some 30 minutes past midnight. She had made a special dinner for him, thinking it could help, calm the light argument that they had the night before, but it only ruined her mood even more. That night was so bad because I've never heard my parents yell that loud at each other. And after that night, my mom told me that she was leaving. She was tired of welcoming Dad with different female colognes on his shirt, finding rubbers in his car, and many other things. When she told me that she was getting a divorce and that her mental and emotional health was at stake, it broke my heart. I wanted more than anything to see my parents get along and be happy like other families. My father did not even take my mom seriously when she told him that she was leaving. All he said was, and he continued to eat his breakfast that morning. I expected him to try to talk to her so, they could work things out, maybe even settle things. but he did not do that. A couple months later, the divorce was finalized, and that's how my parents went their separate ways. Shortly after Mom left, she had to be taken to a mental health hospital because she wanted to harm herself. So I had to shuffle between my father's house and my grandparents' house, or most times I'd have to stay at my best friend's house. When I still lived with both of my parents, I never really understood what my mom meant until I got to live alone with Dad. He would come home with different girls every night and spend the night with them, including the ones he introduced as his business partners and distant cousin. Financially, Father was doing well, and I guess that's the reason all the girls were just flocking towards him. It got to the point where a week would not even pass without a house party. And my dad would invite some of his friends that were almost like him, and they would bring half-naked girls to party with them. When he started the new party habit, my dad would ask me to stay in my room upstairs and not come down. But one day I decided to see what was going on downstairs. And to this day I cannot get that unholy image out of my head. His constant weekly party was one of the reasons I had to move in with my grandparents for almost a year. I could not do anything at my father's house. I mean, not my homework, not anything. They were always strangers invading my space, and I never liked, 90% of them? About a year after I moved to my grandparents' house, my dad called one day to announce that he was visiting me, and he was bringing somebody very special. Well, later that evening he came there with a very pretty lady with him, whom he introduced as Sydney. Sydney was his new girlfriend, and he wanted me to meet her. That was the first time my dad was officially just introducing me to a woman. In the past, he never introduced me like that to his friends, and when I saw her, I suspected that there was something going on between them. Which turned out to be true. Sydney looked like a model, and later on I realized that she used to be a model, actually, for a very famous brand, and I was excited to meet her. The first day that we met, we talked about so many things. I mean, school, grades, boys, my favorites, and so much more. I had so much fun with her, and that's how we became friends. She asked about my mom, and I told her that my mom had been in and out of mental hospitals, but she was doing okay. Sydney seemed to feel bad for me, and she promised that she would simply just take care of me till my mom would fully recover. Well, that first day, she did not mention anything about me moving back into my father's house. It was on her fourth visit that she asked if I would like to move in. She told me that my dad was asking her to move in and she didn't want to be alone inside of the house. Well, she wanted me to move back in with my father. I told her about the parties, the endless visitors, and the other things that made living with father unbearable, and she simply promised that it would all come to a stop. Well, you know what? She was right. Everything stopped, including the parties and the annoying visiting. It was almost like Sydney changed my dad in a way that my mom could not. Well, my mom was calm, an introverted person who barely spoke, except when she was very angered. But Sydney was different. She was outspoken, intimidating, a kind of lady, and I think it was the reason my father listened to her and respected her. The few times that they argued about something, my dad would always be the one that would end up apologizing to Sydney. This was something that he's never done to Mom. The icing on the cake, however, happened one night. The winter night it was, I was in my room when I heard a very loud argument from my dad's room. Sydney was screaming at him, and he just kept begging her. She had seen a text message on his phone from one of his old affair partners, and, well, she went mad. She packed her things that night to leave, but Dad pleaded so much that he even dropped to his knees. When I went out to see what was happening, he even asked me to please beg Sydney not to leave us, and I did. It felt like the right thing to do at the time, but I'd say, years later, it turned out to be one of the worst mistakes of my life. To cut a long story short, Sydney and my father settled that night, but it was not the end of their arguments. In fact, they fought almost every single night, and each time they did, it always got worse. Sydney had the habit of breaking things, and she was abusive. She always abused my father at the slightest opportunity, and if she did not like the way that things were going, she would yell till the roof fell. I think her attitude was one of the reasons my father did not marry her as fast as I expected. They dated for 4 good years, and this whole time I lived with him. For the first year she lived with us, she treated me with love and made me feel like she actually cared about me. But after we got familiar with one another, she tried to just keep pretending. She would assign me all these household chores to make me just get angry and angry. At every little thing I did, she would lash out. She was so harsh. She did not cook my meals, and we no longer talked like we used to. She would prefer to be on the phone with her girlfriends all day, and then spend time with me. The only time she seemed to be a bit nice to me was in my dad's presence, and it did not take long for me to realize what she was trying to do. When I turned 15, my dad proposed to her, and they started the wedding planning almost immediately. Since getting married was something that she'd been looking forward to, she wanted her wedding with my dad to be her dream wedding and the talk of the town. She hired the best fashion designer and makeup artist and other celebrities to handle her wedding. To some level, I was a bit excited about her wedding, even though she had been treating me badly. But when I overheard her having a conversation with her friend one day, the excitement was absolutely gone. Through her conversation with her friend, I found out that she did not even love my dad as much as she claimed to. That's not all. She did not love me at all. In fact, she's been pretending right in front of me from the first day she met me, and just convincing me just to come back home. It was a strategy to win my father and get his heart won over, because she knew how much my dad loved me. Her plan was to get married to my father as soon as they tied the knot. She will try to get pregnant, and the moment she confirmed her pregnancy, she would just go ahead to get me kicked out of the house. So her baby could take over everything and honestly just be the sole heir. Trust me, I was heartbroken when I heard that. In fact, after that day, the way I saw her changed. I knew telling my dad what I had heard would do nothing because Sydney was very manipulative, and she had the ability to just straight up twist everything said to her favor. So instead of telling my dad what I heard, I told my best friend, and we came up with a little plan. I'll be very honest, I miss my mom, and I still do. Those were some of the days I wish that my mom and dad were still together. If only my father adored my mom and treated her the same way he treated Sydney, they would not have ever divorced. My mom loved him much, and she kept giving him multiple chances for him to change, but he took advantage of her kind heart and soft nature. Part of the plan I had with my best friend was not to confront Sydney. I pretended like I had not heard anything and continued to watch her very, very closely. Even with her wedding right around the corner, Sydney did not treat me well. She became even more arrogant, and I believe all of that was just to manipulate me. It was a simple logic. Love a child and shower her with gifts, then stop loving that child and let her wonder what she did wrong. For years, I kept wondering what I've done to Sydney, to get her to stop loving me and start treating me badly, till it dawned on me what she was actually trying to do. 2 months into her wedding, she came to my room one evening and asked if she could come inside. That came as a shocker to me because she never, ever came inside of my room. And, she wanted to talk. Then she began to talk about all her wedding preparations and how tired that she was. Note that this was the first time that we had this kind of intimate conversation in years. And from the moment she stepped into my room, I knew she was up to no good. After talking about all her preparations and the famous people that she had invited, she told me that she would love to give me a speech on her wedding day. She wants me to speak in front of everyone. At first, I thought she wanted me to blow her trumpet in front of all those famous people so that they could see her as a good person. But it was more than that. She wanted me to put my mom down and lie to the world that she was the best thing that ever happened in my life. To be more specific, she wanted me to say terrible things about my mom, and how my mom drained my dad mentally and otherwise. But from the moment she stepped into my dad's life became better. That's not all. She also gave me the condition that if I did that, she would love and accept me as her own daughter, and we would go back to the way that we used to be. Well, she used that against me because she knew how much I wanted a mom. And since we were both close at one time, she believed that I was likely to fall for something like that. At that moment, I wanted to rip her head off her body, but I had to remain calm. There's no asking if I would do such a thing because I already knew that she was with my father for her own selfish reasons, and it wasn't like she loved any of us. So instead of getting mad, I told her I was ready to do everything she had said so far, and she would love and accept me, and we would go back to the way that we used to be. When she heard that, she was so over the moon, happy, and she even hugged me for the first time in a long time, and then asked if I'd had anything to eat. Well, I would be lying if I said that I did not notice any difference in the attitude after that day. She became more friendly, but we weren't close. I'm sure she deliberately set up her high walls so I would feel motivated to impress her with my speech on her wedding day. My dad was quite surprised at her extra friendliness, and from the look on his face, I could tell that he was impressed. The only bad side is that they've been fighting too much lately, to be honest, especially because of the wedding. Sydney's gone beyond the budget for the wedding, and trust me, my dad budgeted a lot of money for their wedding. I'd say that the most annoying part is that anytime my dad tries to talk to her, she makes a fuss out of it and she yells and abuses him, calls him names and says very demeaning things of him. And every time this happened, my dad just gets really hurt. Anyways, the reason I'm sharing this here is because I don't want Sydney and my dad to get married. And honestly, guys, I will do everything in my power to just straight up ruin it for them. As of the time I make this post, their wedding is in 2 weeks, and Sydney's given me the speech that she wants me to read out loud at her wedding. Guys, the speech is terrible, and she's written so many degrading things about my mom. This is someone she's never even met before, except for the family pictures that she's seen in the house. She even went as far as to instruct me not to change any part of the speech and that I should read it as I'm given, as I really do want to be loved and accepted. I didn't want to say this, but I have to. Sydney is subtly threatening me. She bragged about having the power to make my father love or hate me, and I know what she means. My best friend and I have made plans, but I still need your help and suggestions, please. Even though my father's not been the best dad in the world, I know that marrying Sydney will actually ruin his life even more. But I'm bothered he might not see things my way if I go ahead with the plans that I have. So I'm asking, would I be the a-hole if I straight up exposed all of Sydney's plans on their wedding day? But just to do that, it'll set my dad free. I look forward to your comments and suggestions. Thank you so much. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is that of a family drama, but it has a little bit of blackmail involved. We're about to see something crazy in the upcoming update. If you guys are enjoying today's story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. For daily videos, the best way to see them is simply clicking the subscribe button. Alright, let's jump into update number 1. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate how you're all concerned about me. I did not know so many people have had their own terrible experiences with their own stepmoms, and I'm glad so many of you were able to get out of that bad situation. For what it's worth, Sydney is not my stepmom yet, and to be honest, I would prefer to be motherless than have someone like her because, I don't like her. Someone here commented that I should try to talk to my dad and tell him that I'm not comfortable with him marrying Sydney. Yeah, although that is a pretty decent idea. You all don't know my father. He's crazy about Sydney, and anyone who talks against her will automatically become an enemy, even if it's me. Aside from loving Sydney, I think my dad's afraid of her in some way. I'm saying this because he acts differently around her. It's almost like he feels privileged to date someone like Sydney. And that sucks because there's absolutely nothing special about her. Concerning the speech she gave to me to read on her wedding day, I've written a new version, just as you all suggested. I've written all the horrible things about her, and I cannot wait to tell the whole world how much of a terrible, manipulative woman that she is. Aside from stepping the constant parties in my father's house and stopping all those random strangers, Sydney has been bad for Dad. She's toxic and has only managed to make his life even worse. Well, on second thought, I think my dad deserves everything that he's gotten. He treated my mom badly, and I can only say that this is his karma with a pretty face. Can you guys believe that my father had not tried to reach out to my mom since Sydney came into his life? Even when he knew that she had been in and out of mental hospitals. He doesn't even talk about her or mention her name, and it only shows that he never ever loved her. These few days have been so busy with the wedding planning that he doesn't even have my time. The wedding's in 14 days, and somehow I feel bad for what I'm about to do. I know it's going to ruin all his plans and all the money he spent on the wedding, but I have no choice. Sydney is a cunning snake and needs to see that for himself. I'm still open to your comments and suggestions on how to make the day a remarkable one for Sydney. I look forward to your comments, guys, and I'll make another update ASAP. Update number 2. Hello, guys. You guys are literally the best. I can't tell you or even begin to let you know how all your comments have been such an immense help. I would have made an update since, but something has came up and I simply had to deal with it. It happened that she had gone to order a cake. And, well, that's normal for a wedding, right? Well, this cake was $3,000 from a celebrity baker. And when my dad found out, guys, he was absolutely livid. According to my father, they had already gone for a cake testing just a couple of weeks earlier, and they paid for a 4-tier cake for their wedding reception. But Sydney went behind my dad's back to order a second cake because she wanted their wedding to be the best one yet. When my dad found out, he canceled the order without even telling Sydney, and when Sydney walked into the house, she started yelling from the door. I was in the kitchen trying to make myself a little sandwich when I heard her yelling inside the house. So, she actually flung her purse on the couch and went straight to attack my father. She pushed my dad first, and the second time my dad blocked her hand. It happened so fast, literally a blink of the eye, and before I could wrap my head around what's happening, she was breaking vases, left and right and center. She claimed that my father embarrassed her by canceling the order and had ruined her reputation straight up. My dad tried to explain that he did that because he was trying to manage money and they could simply not afford to have 2 expensive cakes at one time. But Sydney, obviously, just didn't understand. She yelled and yelled, then slapped my dad and walked out of the house. In fact, if I've not gotten out of her way, she would have probably pushed me down or even hurt me as well. That day, she did not sleep at home. Well, my dad seriously just kept calling her phone, but she wasn't taking any of his phone calls. I mean, personally, I don't care, but I was a bit worried about my dad who stayed up all night waiting for her. So, funny enough, Sydney did not contribute a dime to the wedding, but she was concerned about luxury, right? She wanted all the celebrities to take care of her wedding, from the food to her makeup to the shoes to the hairstylist, and my dad had to pay for everything. So, she returned after 3 days, and that's after my dad called almost all of her friends and her family. It's just stupid, and it makes me so angry. She keeps taking advantage of father, and even though it's so obvious that she doesn't love my dad keeps acting like a fool. Anyways, that's it, guys. I'll make another update after the wedding. Thank you to everybody out there. Final update. Hello guys, the update you've all been waiting for is finally here. 2 days ago, Sydney and my dad tied the knot officially, and they weren't in any way prepared for what I did. So, in the previous comments, you all suggested that I play dumb till the wedding day, and that's exactly what I did. I'd say, even though Sydney was getting more and more violent, my dad still chose to go ahead with the wedding. After the church wedding, we went to the reception venue, and it was time for me to give my famous speech. You all should have seen the joy and excitement on Sydney's face when I was called to come and give my speech. I acted all nice and excited till I got to the stage, and then I read the first 2 lines from her original speech just to lead her on. When she heard it, she adjusted well on her seat, held my dad's hand, and then told everyone that before I continued with her speech, I wanted to play a special video compilation I made for her and my dad. She was eager to see what it was, but then the video played and everyone saw how she was yelling at Dad, pushing him, breaking stuff, and slapping him. She could not hide the disappointment all over her face. She gets up immediately, fakes a smile, and began to explain the video. It was quite obvious that she was the one at fault, and everybody saw how abusive and toxic she was. I did not let the video play for long because I still had a speech to give. LOL. After the video stopped playing, Sydney was still standing and trying to explain very hard that there was a mix-up somewhere. Yeah, no one believed her. While she was walking from seat to seat explaining to her fellow celebrities, I read the original speech that I'd written for her, and I told the world how much of a terrible woman she truly is. In front of everyone, I told Father about the phone call that she had with one of her friends, and how she planned to kick me out of the house after she fell pregnant. I made sure I told him that Sydney did not love him, and was only suing him for benefits. She was so shocked and mad at the same time, and even denied saying such a thing, when no one simply believed her. Well, you know what happened then. To stop me from exposing her more, she ran to snatch the microphone away from me. And unfortunately, she stepped on her long wedding gown and straight up tripped and fell. It was an embarrassing moment, and everyone laughed at her and recorded her as she laid on the floor. I know that she hates me now, probably more than ever, but it is what it is. I mean, my dad was so disappointed at how she acted, and his countenance changed for the rest of the wedding. I didn't even know that they signed a prenup, and now I get why Sydney wanted to use her future pregnancy as a source to get the money from Father. It's been 2 days since the wedding, and Sydney has not said a word to me. My dad has been way kinder to me, but I've made up my mind to move out of the house because for the past few days, they've been fighting over a naked picture Sydney saw on my father's phone. It got so bad that Sydney took some stuff and left the house, hoping my dad would call and beg her. But you know what the funny thing is? He didn't. So, I'm sure that he's getting tired of her. I'm glad I was able to humiliate her, and I'm honestly just so satisfied right now. Meanwhile, my dad's secretly planning to divorce Sydney. He hasn't told her yet, and I can't wait for the day that he's going to serve her those divorce papers. So, he's finally realized that Sydney does not love him, and he's picked me, his family, over her. I know she'll get what she deserves, and I can't wait for that day to happen. Thank you guys for your comments and helpful suggestions. I would not have done this all without you guys. Well, I'll be honest for you, I was rooting for OP this entire story. It was so ridiculous, everything that OP had to endure because of Sydney. I mean, she was pretty toxic of a human, and she just wanted all the attention, but her ulterior motive was to take everything from OP's father. I want to know what you guys think about that. If you were in OP's position, what would you have done differently if you were in that exact scenario? Let's talk about it down below in the comment section, guys. If you're new to the channel, I want to welcome you. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every day. And if you guys want to be a part of these daily animated stories, all you need to do is click that big subscribe button directly underneath this video. Thank you once again. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And of course, remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.